There's this fertile blue line that cuts through the endless stretches of dunes in the Sahara. It's given life for generations to those near its banks. And so for as long as there have been people in Sudan, they have had the most important component of a flourishing civilization: good farmland. So this was never supposed to be a hunger story. But through a devastating combination of climate, cost, and conflict, Sudan's favorable potential has turned into the worst humanitarian crisis in the world today. In fact, the situation is so dire that it can be seen from space. And that is what we did. With the help of experts, we conducted a nationwide geospatial analysis comparing satellite imagery from 2023 and 2025, measuring the health of Sudan's vegetation during its peak growing season. We wanted to see just how bad things have gotten here. But first, some background.
Here is an illustrated summary of the news.
The power of that fertile blue line through Sudan actually grew initially in 1925 when 4,000 kilometers of canals and ditches were built. It turned the land between the rivers into some of the most productive farmland on the continent. Many nearby countries have actually purchased or leased farmland in Sudan in recent years, because Sudan has as much arable land as 10 of its closest Arab countries combined. A narrow strip of blue and green amongst its mostly arid neighbors. I could do a whole history on the canals, but the bottom line is that for the last 50 years, through a combination of political instability, conflicting priorities, the whole system began to decline. But the deterioration of the canals became the least of their problems.
COVID-19.
Coronavirus is a pandemic.
COVID was kind to nobody. But in Sudan, inflation rose by 143% in just 1 year. And by 2022, a family needed to work the equivalent of 9 full days just to buy a week's worth of groceries. That math does not math. But as the rest of the world started to pull itself out of COVID, Sudan was pulled into a deeper crisis. In April 2023, fighting erupted in Khartoum between Sudan's National Army and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Force, or RSF. More than 15 million people, 1 in 3 Sudanese, have been forced to flee.
مشينا مع خالتي مشينا السوق نشتري فياخد ضرب قام الطيران بقى يضرب والهاونات تضرب ويلا قمنا جرينا لمسافة بعيدة تاني لا في رجوع كده عشان أرجع ياهو قمت جيت معاها أنا أمي متوفية وفي أبوي وأخواني ديل خليتهم وياهو لي هسي ما بعرف محلهم وين وما في وسيلة إنه أنا أتكلم معاه.
So now we've seen a bit of the situation on the ground. So let's zoom up to see what it's like from space. What the data reveals is staggering. Nearly 39,000 square kilometers of land, an area the size of Switzerland, has been degraded in this country. And that doesn't even account for the 41% of the country that we couldn't analyze because of cloud cover obscuring the satellite imagery. First, here's a map from Al Jazeera that shows how Sudan's agricultural production breaks down. The country is on the edge of the Sahara, of course, and so every acre that can be used is critical. So the brown here is obviously the desert. The yellow-greeny color is the grazing land for cattle and other animals, and the orange is for crops. Now, here's our high-level map. The green here is traditionally where Sudan has been able to grow its own food. This may be from crops or animals, but the bottom line is food could grow in this green area. The red is what has been lost. Here are a few before and after images to get a scale of the destruction. And in the first year of the conflict alone, cereal production dropped by 46%, which would have been roughly a year's worth of food for 18 million people, vanished. And remember that this data actually compares 2023 to 2025. It doesn't account for any possible destruction in the last 12 months, a year that has included things such as the siege of El Fasher.
ما بخلي الأكل الشراب يخش جوا والأكل جوا انتهت ما كتر زي كان في جيران بس كان أم وولد كان بيت أم رضع هناكلهم بس كان نهلهم بس بموية بس ناكلوها نقول.
Now, there are three main ways that the conflict specifically destroyed farmland, and when you start to unpack it, you begin to realize how hard it will be to go back to normal. Obviously, there's the intentional destruction of farmland, but then, of course, you have the displacement of people. Farmers that would have normally cared for the land have had to flee and left their fields unattended. And then those with livestock have been forced to flee into other areas with their animals, their only source of income. And then those animals begin eating the land that traditionally held crops in the new areas.
na akeba tani asa dola ana azwariye kawla nga wariske ndikisi nga warike ndagil wari bagar ko ashara da miskabe asa na no futoy lela isa mis dokabe wuri woni zangaye ashara da na lewa amistajar mis dokabe.
So in order to return to what it was like before, whole infrastructure has to be rebuilt so that any crops grown have a place to be processed or distributed. But then also, thousands or even millions of farmers have to find their way back safely to where they were before and start over on their land. And of course, that is if they weren't killed in the process. Sudanese people will be reliant on humanitarian assistance for years, or they will starve. All of this in a country that should be sending out food rather than bringing it in. That stat about how many days of work to afford a week's worth of groceries, now it's more than 20 days for 1 week of food. Today, an estimated 40% of Sudan's population, nearly 20 million people, are expected to need food assistance in 2026. The hunger is concentrated where the agricultural destruction is the worst. In Darfur and Kordofan, satellite data shows agricultural losses between 30 and 40%. These same regions host the highest concentration of displaced people. So you have the most amount of people moving into the areas that are the most dysfunctional and destroyed. World Vision has been working in Sudan throughout the conflict, one of the largest humanitarian operations in the country. And in regions where markets are still functioning, we use cash assistance to help families make their own decisions about their most urgent needs. In agricultural areas, World Vision is distributing seeds, tools, and other things to help these farmers hold on to what remains of local production. Mobile health clinics are reaching children and women where facilities have collapsed. And child-friendly spaces are giving children who have survived unimaginable things a place to be safe, play, and recover. Sudan has never been a simple story of a poor country that cannot feed itself. It's a story of a country with extraordinary agricultural foundations that have been systematically broken by economic collapse, mismanagement, and conflict that has not only killed people but destroyed the land that they depend on for the future.